My name is Cassidy. I'm 22 years old, and 3 weeks ago I stood in my grandmother's living room watching her hands shake as she held bank statements covered in red circles. Tears streamed down her face when she asked me the question that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Where did my $18,000 go? I stared at her, completely confused, because I had only received $200 for graduation. That's when the truth hit me like a freight train. My parents had lied. They had stolen from both of us. And they were planning to disappear. Before we dive into this nightmare, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, because I want to know where my story is reaching. And if you've ever dealt with family betrayal, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone in this. Subscribe because what happens next is going to shock you, I promise. Now let me take you back to where this all started. 3 weeks ago, on what should have been the happiest day of my life. 3 weeks earlier, I walked across that stage at the University of Oregon on a sunny May morning that felt like pure magic. The sun was so bright I could barely see the crowd. But I heard them cheering. And somewhere in that sea of faces were my parents, Linda and Frank, clapping for their daughter, their only daughter, the first person in our entire family to graduate from college with a 4-year degree. I had a business degree in my hand, and dreams bigger than the sky. Everything felt possible that morning. Everything felt right. After the ceremony, we went to this family restaurant downtown. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and waiters who remember your name. My parents seemed different that day, lighter somehow, like they'd won the lottery. My dad ordered the most expensive steak on the menu without even glancing at the price, and my mom got this fancy salmon dish she'd always said was too pricey. I remember thinking it was weird, because just 2 months earlier, I'd told me they couldn't help with my textbook costs for spring semester. I'd had to pick up extra shifts at the campus bookstore to cover it. But that day, money seemed like no object at all. We were halfway through the meal when my mom reached into her purse and pulled out a card. It had my name written on the envelope in handwriting I recognized immediately, Grandma Dorothy's shaky cursive. The loops a little uneven because of her arthritis. My heart jumped because Grandma Dorothy had always been special to me. She lived 3 hours away in a small town near the coast, and I hadn't seen her in about 6 months. Life had gotten so busy with finals and job applications that time just slipped away, you know? But she never forgot me. Never missed a birthday or holiday. I opened the card carefully. Inside was a sweet message about how proud she was, how she always knew I'd do great things, and tucked in the fold was $200 in crisp $20 bills. I smiled, genuinely grateful, even though part of me had secretly hoped for more. 4 years of college, all those late nights studying, all those sacrifices, and $200 felt almost symbolic rather than substantial. But immediately, I felt guilty for even thinking that way. My mom must have seen something in my face because she jumped in right away with an explanation. She said, "Grandma's on a fixed income. Honey, this is really generous for her. You know how tight money is for elderly people on Social Security." My dad nodded along, sipping his wine, adding that Grandma had probably been saving for months just to give me this much. I felt terrible for my momentary disappointment. Here was my grandmother, living on limited funds, and she'd scraped together $200 for me. That was love. That was sacrifice. I tucked the money into my wallet and made a mental note to call her the next day to thank her properly. My mom quickly changed the subject, asking about my job hunt, whether I'd heard back from any of the companies I'd interviewed with. My dad launched into this whole speech about the importance of starting at the bottom and working your way up, like he had done at his manufacturing job. The conversation moved on, and I let the moment pass. Other relatives had come to the graduation too. My aunt and uncle gave me $50. My cousin slipped me a $100 bill with a wink. My dad's boss, who I'd met a few times at company picnics, handed me a gift card for $25 to a coffee shop. Everyone was generous in their own way, and I felt loved and supported. Then, at the end of the meal, my parents surprised me with an envelope of their own. Inside was $1,000 in cash. They said it was for my first month's rent when I found an apartment, to help me get started in the real world. I was overwhelmed. I hugged them both, told them they didn't have to do this, but they insisted. My mom actually teared up a little, saying she just wanted to see me succeed and be happy. We ended the evening with champagne, cheap stuff from the grocery store, but it felt fancy in that moment. My dad raised his glass and made a toast. To new beginnings, he said. To Cassidy's future. We clinked glasses, and I remember thinking this was one of those perfect moments you hold on to forever. My parents were proud of me, my family supported me, I had money to start my adult life. Everything was falling into place exactly as it should. I had no idea that in 3 weeks, I'd be standing in my grandmother's house, learning that this perfect day was built on theft and lies. The week after graduation was a blur of job applications and interviews. I'd moved back into my parents' house temporarily, sleeping in my childhood bedroom with the faded posters still on the walls, waiting to hear back from the companies I'd applied to. It felt weird being back home after 4 years of independence. But I told myself it was just for a few weeks, maybe a month tops. I spent my days polishing my resume, sending out cover letters, and scrolling through job boards. Normal post-graduation stuff. But it was during that first week that I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. On Wednesday, I came home from a coffee shop interview to find my dad pulling into the driveway in a brand new truck, not used. Not a few years old, but a brand new Ford F-150 with temporary tags still in the window. The thing was massive, glossy black with chrome details, and it looked expensive. Really expensive. I stood there staring at it, my mouth probably hanging open, because this was not the kind of purchase my family made. We were practical people. We drove cars until they died, then bought used replacements and drove those until they died too. My dad climbed out of the truck with this huge grin on his face, running his hand along the hood like it was made of gold. I asked him what happened to his old truck, the one Head had for 8 years, and he just shrugged and said he got a promotion at work, that management had been really impressed with his recent performance, and Head gotten this incredible financing deal on the new one. The monthly payments were totally manageable, he assured me. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off. My dad was a shift supervisor at a manufacturing plant. Promotions there didn't usually come with enough of a raise to afford a $60,000 truck. 2 days later, my mom came home from what she called a quick shopping trip, carrying 3 large shopping bags with fancy logos on them. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, brands I'd only ever seen in magazines or on celebrities. She pulled out a purse that I knew, even with my limited fashion knowledge, cost at least $2,000 or $3,000. She had that guilty look on her face, that expression she always got when she'd spent more money than she should have, but she laughed it off when I raised my eyebrows. Everything was on sale, she insisted. End of season clearances, you wouldn't believe the deals I got. She said she deserved nice things after years of sacrificing for the family, which made me feel bad for even questioning it. But the math didn't work in my head. Even on sale, those bags and that purse had to have cost serious money. Money that, as far as I knew, my parents didn't have just lying around. By the end of the second week, things got even stranger. I came downstairs one morning to find my parents at the kitchen table with brochures spread out in front of them. Cruise brochures, Caribbean destinations, luxury ships with pools and casinos and fancy restaurants. My mom was practically glowing as she showed me the itinerary they'd booked. 10 days sailing from Miami to various islands, with stops in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands and Mexico. The trip was scheduled for 4 weeks from now, and when I casually asked how much something like that cost, my dad waved his hand dismissively and said they'd gotten a last-minute deal, that they'd been saving for years for a trip like this. But that couldn't be true. I remembered distinctly, just 3 months ago, my mom complaining that they couldn't afford to fix the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Shed said they'd have to wait until tax refund season. Now they were booking $10,000 cruises? I tried calling Grandma Dorothy that same day to thank her properly for the graduation money. I felt bad that I'd let almost 2 weeks pass without calling her. But when I picked up the house phone, the line was dead. I mentioned it to my mom, and she said, "Oh, we've been having issues with the phone company, some problem with the lines, it should be fixed soon." I asked if I could use her cell to call Grandma, and she said Grandma wasn't feeling well, that Shed asked not to be disturbed while she rested. My dad backed her up immediately, adding that we'd all visit soon, maybe next month, once Grandma was feeling better. Something about the way they both jumped to explain, the way they looked at each other before answering, set off alarm bells in my head, but I talked myself out of it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was stressed about job hunting and reading into things that weren't there. The next week, I got a job offer. Entry-level position at a marketing firm downtown. Decent salary, benefits, everything a new graduate could hope for. I was thrilled. My parents were thrilled too, maybe too thrilled. They insisted on celebrating at this steakhouse it always wanted to try but could never afford. The kind of place where appetizers cost $30 and steaks start at $60. We went that night, and my dad ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. The final bill had to be close to $500. As my dad paid with his credit card without even flinching, I watched him carefully. This was the same man who used to clip coupons religiously. The same man who taught me to always check the clearance section first. Now he was dropping $500 on dinner like it was nothing. When I brought up visiting Grandma Dorothy, maybe taking a drive out to the coast before I started my new job in 3 weeks, both my parents shut down the idea immediately. My mom's face went tight, and she said Grandma really wasn't up for visitors, that she needed peace and quiet to recover from whatever was ailing her. My dad added that maybe in a few months we could all go together, make a whole day of it. Their reactions were so quick, so defensive, that I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what yet. That night, lying in bed, I went over everything in my mind. The new truck, the designer bags, the expensive cruise, the lavish dinners, my parents spending money like they'd won the lottery. And Grandma, my grandmother who always answered the phone on the second ring, suddenly too sick to talk to anyone. None of it made sense. The next morning, after my parents left for work, I searched online for Grandma Dorothy's number. It always just called the house phone or asked my parents to connect me, but now I needed her number directly. It took me 20 minutes of searching through old emails and looking up the town she lived in, but I finally found it. I sat on my bed, staring at the number on my screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. Part of me felt like I was betraying my parents by going behind their backs, but a bigger part of me needed to know the truth. I needed to hear my grandmother's voice and confirm that she was okay. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, when my parents are at work, I'll call her. I'll find out what's really going on. I had no idea that phone call would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. The next morning felt like it lasted forever. I waited for my parents to leave for work, watched through the window as my dad's new truck pulled out of the driveway, followed 5 minutes later by my mom's car. Then I waited another 30 minutes just to be absolutely sure they weren't coming back for something they forgot. The house was completely silent except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, Grandma Dorothy's number already pulled up on the screen. My finger hovered over the call button, and I realized my hands were shaking. This was ridiculous, I told myself. This was my grandmother. I called her all the time. Why was I so nervous? But I knew why. Because if my parents had been lying about her being sick, if they'd been deliberately keeping us apart, then something was very wrong. And once I made this call, once I opened this door, I couldn't close it again. I'd have to face whatever truth was on the other side. I took a deep breath and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe she really was sick and couldn't come to the phone. Maybe my parents had been telling the truth and I was about to feel terrible for doubting them. Then, on the 4th ring, I heard her voice. Cassidy! Oh my goodness, Cassidy! Is that you? She sounded completely normal, not sick, not weak. Actually, she sounded more energetic than I'd heard her in months. I felt this weird combination of relief and confusion wash over me. Grandma, hi, yes, it's me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been trying to reach you. She laughed, this warm, familiar sound that made my chest ache. You've been trying to reach me? Sweetheart, I've been calling your parents' house every single day for 3 weeks. Your mother keeps telling me you're out, that you're busy with job hunting, that you'll call me back, but you never do. I sat there, frozen, processing what Shed just said. Every single day. Shed been calling every single day, and my parents never told me. Not once. Grandma, I said slowly. Mom told me you were sick. She said you needed rest and didn't want to be disturbed. The silence on the other end of the line was so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Grandma spoke again. And her voice had changed completely. It was harder now, sharper. Sick? Cassidy. I'm not sick. I've been perfectly healthy. I've been worried sick about you, but that's not the same thing. Why would your mother tell you that? I didn't have an answer. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of this. Why would my parents lie? Why would they keep Grandma and me apart? Unless they were hiding something. Unless they didn't want us talking to each other. Grandma's voice softened a little. Honey! Did you get my graduation gift? It was like the floor dropped out from under me. The moment I'd been dreading without even knowing I was dreading it. Yes, I said. And my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Thank you so much for the $200, Grandma. It was really generous and I appreciate it so much. The silence came back, longer this time, heavier. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. $200? Cassidy. What are you talking about? I sent you $18,000. The world tilted sideways. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. 18,000? That was impossible. It'd gotten 200. The card said 200. My parents had been there when I opened it. They'd told me about Grandma's fixed income and how generous this gift was. Grandma, I said, and my voice was shaking now. I don't understand. I got a card from you with $200 inside. That's what I got. Grandma's voice broke. Oh no. Oh no no no. Cassidy, listen to me very carefully. I liquidated savings bonds that your grandfather and I had been collecting since the day you were born. 22 years of savings. I sent you a cashier's check for $18,000. 18,000. It was supposed to be your start in life, your safety net, your future. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. She kept talking, her words coming faster now. I sent it certified mail to your parents' house 2 weeks before your graduation. I have the tracking information. It was signed for. By your mother, Linda. The signature is right here on the receipt. I waited and waited to hear from you, waited for a thank you call or a text or anything. When weeks went by with nothing, I started to worry. I thought maybe you were upset with me. Or maybe the amount wasn't enough. Or maybe you thought it was too much. I didn't know what to think. So I started calling every day. And your mother kept making excuses why you couldn't talk. Now I know why. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The new truck. The designer bags. The cruise. The expensive dinners. 18,000 minus 200 equals 17,800. That was a down payment on a truck. That was designer bags and a cruise deposit. That was everything my parents had been spending money on for the past 3 weeks. They'd stolen from me. From both of us. My parents, the people who raised me, who I trusted more than anyone in the world, had stolen my future and lied straight to my face about it. Grandma was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. They stole from you, baby. They stole from both of us. I'm so sorry. I should have sent it directly to your apartment. I should have called you to confirm you got it. I just trusted them. I thought they were your parents. They'd never hurt you. Her voice hardened again. I'm coming over there right now. I'm getting in my car and I'm driving to your house. No, I said quickly. Please don't. Just give me some time. Let me confront them first. Sweetheart, they stole $18,000, she said, her voice rising. This isn't something you confront them about over dinner. This is a crime. We need to call the police. The word police hit me like a physical blow. Police meant lawyers and courts and jail. Police meant my parents could go to prison. These were my parents. The people who packed my lunches for school and came to my soccer games and taught me to drive. But they'd also stolen my future. They'd looked me in the eye and lied. They'd planned this. The card with $200 that had been deliberate. They'd made it seem like Grandma had only sent a small amount so I'd never question it. They'd kept us apart so we couldn't compare stories. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated theft. Grandma, I need to think, I said. I need to figure out what to do. She was quiet for a moment, then she said okay. But I'm giving you until 6 o'clock tonight. If you haven't called me back by then, if I don't hear from you that this is resolved, I'm calling the police myself. Do you understand me? I nodded even though she couldn't see me, whispered yes. And then we said goodbye. After I hung up, I just sat there on my bed, staring at the wall. My whole life had just changed in a 10-minute phone call. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my parents, about trust and love and safety, all of it was a lie. And I had less than 9 hours to decide what to do about it. I sat on my bed for maybe 20 minutes after hanging up with Grandma, just staring at nothing, my brain trying to process what I'd just learned. $18,000. My parents had stolen $18,000 from me. From us. And they'd looked me in the eye at my graduation dinner and acted like everything was normal, like they were just proud parents celebrating their daughter. The betrayal was so massive I couldn't wrap my mind around it. But then, something shifted inside me. The shock started hardening into something else. Anger. Cold, focused anger. If this was true, if my parents really had done this, then I needed proof. Real, concrete proof. Not just Grandma's word against theirs. Because I knew my parents, and if I confronted them without evidence, they'd deny everything. They'd make me feel crazy for even suggesting it. I got up from my bed and walked down the hallway to the one room in the house I'd never been allowed in. My parents' home office. Growing up, that door was always locked, and whenever I asked what was in there, my dad would just say boring adult stuff, paperwork and bills, nothing interesting. I'd accepted that answer as a kid. Now, standing in front of that closed door, I realized that locked room probably contained everything I needed. I tried the handle, locked, just like always. But I remembered something from high school, back when I'd snuck out a few times to meet friends. My dad kept all the important keys in his bedroom, dresser, top drawer, under his socks. I went to my parents' bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This felt wrong, invasive, like I was violating their privacy. But then I reminded myself what they'd done. They'd stolen $18,000 from me. They'd forged my signature, lied to my face, and kept me away from my grandmother to cover it up. If anyone had violated trust here, it was them. I opened the dresser drawer, pushed aside the neatly folded socks, and there it was. A small key ring with 3 keys on it. I grabbed it and went back to the office door. The second key worked. The door swung open, and I stepped inside. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a home office. Desk with a computer, filing cabinet, bookshelf filled with binders and folders, everything neat and organized. I went straight to the filing cabinet. It had 3 drawers, and the top one was labeled Finances. I pulled it open and started going through folders. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, everything filed by year and month, perfectly organized. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the most recent bank statements, and there it was. 3 weeks ago, right around my graduation, a deposit, $17,800, the exact amount, $18,000 minus the $200 they'd given me in that card. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. My hands were trembling so badly that the first few photos came out blurry, and I had to stop, take a breath, and try again. I photographed every page of that bank statement, showing their account balance before and after. Before the deposit, they'd had $53 in their checking account. $53. They'd been broke. Maxed out credit cards, past due notices, the works. Then suddenly, $17,800 appears. And everything changes. New truck, designer bags, cruise, everything made sense now. Horrible, awful sense. I kept digging. In another folder, I found the actual cashier's check. It hadn't been cashed, because you can't cash a check that's not made out to you. It was made out to me. Cassidy Harper. My full legal name printed right there on the check. $18,000. From Grandma Dorothy's bank. There was a deposit slip attached to it, and I saw the problem immediately. Someone had forged my signature on the endorsement line on the back of the check, then deposited it into my parents' account instead of mine. The signature looked like mine. Kind of. But it wasn't quite right. The handwriting was close but not exact. My mother must have practiced it, tried to make it look real enough that the bank wouldn't question it. I photographed everything: the check, the deposit slip, the forged signature, all of it. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A handwritten note, folded up inside the bank statement folder. It was from my mother to my father, the kind of note they must have passed back and forth when they were planning this whole thing. The note said, in my mother's handwriting, "Shall never know. Dorothy's too old to check her bank records carefully. We need this money more than they do. We can pay it back eventually." My father had written back on the same piece of paper, "What about when Cassidy talks to Dorothy?" My mother's response was underneath, "Well, keep them apart. Tell Cassidy that Dorothy's sick. After the cruise, we'll move to Florida like we planned. Fresh start. She'll be fine on her own by then." I read that last line 3 times. She'll be fine on her own by then. They were planning to abandon me, take my money and move to Florida, and just leave me behind. I looked through more folders with tears streaming down my face. I found cruise tickets. 2 tickets. Just 2. Departure date was 4 weeks from now. One-way flights to Fort Lauderdale. Then a cruise. Then a rental agreement for a condo in Florida. 6-month lease starting next month. They'd planned the whole thing. Steal my graduation money, spend a few weeks living it up, then disappear to Florida and start over. Without me, their daughter. The person they were supposed to love and protect more than anyone. I photographed everything. Every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence I could find. By the time I was done, I had over 50 photos on my phone. Proof of theft. Proof of forgery. Proof of premeditation. Proof that this wasn't some desperate mistake, but a calculated plan to steal from their own daughter and abandon her. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, locked the office door, returned the keys to the dresser drawer. Then I went back to my room and called Grandma. She answered on the first ring. "I found everything," I said. Bank statements, the check, notes where they planned the whole thing. They were going to move to Florida and leave me here. Grandma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice harder than I'd ever heard from her, "I'm calling the police right now." "No," I said. "Not yet. I need to confront them first. I need to see their faces when I show them this evidence. I need to look them in the eye and see if they'll keep lying or if they'll finally tell the truth." Grandma started to argue, but I cut her off. "Please, just give me until tonight. Let me do this." She didn't like it, I could tell, but eventually she agreed. 6 o'clock, she said. "If I haven't heard from you by 6, I'm calling the police, and I'm driving over there myself." It was 1 in the afternoon. My parents would be home around 5:30. I had 4.5 hours to prepare for the confrontation that would either give me answers or destroy what was left of my family. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my room, organizing the evidence and preparing myself for what was coming. I printed out several of the most damning photos, the bank statements showing the deposit, the image of the check made out to me, the handwritten notes about their plan. I put them in a folder and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I sat down and waited. 5:25 p.m. I heard my dad's truck pull into the driveway, the low rumble of that expensive engine. 5:28 p.m. My mom's car. I listened to them come through the front door, heard my mom call out, "Honey, we're home," like this was just another normal evening. I stayed at the kitchen table, sitting perfectly still, the folder of evidence in front of me. My mom walked into the kitchen first. She was carrying grocery bags, probably planning to make dinner. She saw me sitting there and smiled. "Hey, sweetie. You're home early." Then her eyes dropped to the folder on the table, and her smile faltered just a little. "What's all this?" she asked, setting the bags on the counter. My dad came in behind her, loosening his tie. He saw me at the table, saw the folder, and I watched his face change. The color drained away, and his hand froze halfway through pulling off his tie. He knew immediately what this was about. I could see it in his eyes. "Sit down," I said. My voice came out cold and steady, so much calmer than I felt inside. "Both of you, sit down right now." My mom tried to laugh it off. "Cassidy, what's going on? You're being dramatic." But I didn't move, didn't smile, just stared at her until the fake cheerfulness died on her face. I said, "Sit down." The tone of my voice, something in it that I'd never used with them before, made them obey. They pulled out chairs and sat across from me at the kitchen table. My mom's hands were fidgeting with her bracelet. My dad was staring at the folder like it might explode. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, pulled out the first photo. The bank statement showing the deposit of $17,800 from 3 weeks ago. I slid it across the table so it was right in front of them. $17,800, I said. Deposited 3 weeks ago. Right after my graduation. Want to tell me where that money came from? My parents looked at each other. I saw the panic in my mom's eyes, saw my dad's jaw tighten. Neither of them spoke. I pulled out the next photo. The cashier's check. Made out to Cassidy Harper for $18,000. From Dorothy Henderson's account. I slid that across the table too. This was mine, I said, and I could hear my voice starting to shake with anger now. My grandmother sent me $18,000 for graduation. You gave me a card saying 200 and pocketed the rest. My mom's mouth opened like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. My dad found his voice first. That's private financial information, he said, and had the audacity to sound offended. You had no right to go through our personal files. I laughed, this bitter sound that didn't sound like me at all. I had no right? You stole $18,000 from me and you're talking about rights? My dad's face was turning red now. We can explain, he started to say, but I cut him off. I talked to Grandma Dorothy today, I said, and watched my mom's face go completely white. She told me she sent me $18,000. She told me she's been calling every day and you've been screening her calls. She told me the check was sent certified mail and you signed for it. I slid across the photo of the forged signature on the back of the check. You forged my signature and deposited my money into your account. That's bank fraud. That's identity theft. Those are felonies. My mom finally found her voice, and she started crying. We were going to pay you back, she said between sobs. We were desperate. The bills, the debt. We didn't know what else to do. I pulled out the next set of photos. The cruise tickets, the Florida rental agreement, the handwritten notes about their plan to move and leave me behind. Really? I said, my voice rising now. You were going to pay me back from Florida? After you disappeared? My dad stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. You had no right to go through our things, he said again, louder this time. His anger was growing, the defensive rage of someone who knows they're caught. I stood up too, facing him across the table. I had every right, I said. That money was mine. My future. My safety net. And you stole it. You looked me in the eye at my graduation dinner and lied to me. You gave me $200 and acted like it was a generous gift. You kept me away from my grandmother so I wouldn't find out the truth. My mom was sobbing harder now. You don't understand the pressure we were under, she said. The debt collectors, the bills. We were about to lose everything. So you decided to steal from your own daughter? I asked. You decided my future was worth less than your comfort? My dad moved around the table toward me. Watch your mouth, he said, and there was something threatening in his voice that I'd never heard before. Or what? I said, not backing down even though my heart was racing. You'll steal more from me? There's nothing left to take. My dad was right in front of me now, and I saw his hand raise slightly, saw the anger in his eyes, and for a second I thought he might actually hit me. Then there was a knock at the door. Sharp, official sounding. All three of us froze. The knock came again. I moved past my dad, went to the front door, and opened it. Standing on the porch was my Grandma Dorothy, and beside her were 2 police officers. Grandma Dorothy stepped through the door first, and despite everything, despite the chaos and the anger and the betrayal, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. She wasn't supposed to be here yet. It was only 5:45, still 15 minutes before the 6 o'clock deadline we'd agreed on. But she'd come anyway. She'd probably left her house the minute we hung up the phone, knowing I'd need her. Behind her came 2 police officers, a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s with sharp eyes, and a younger man, probably in his 30s, with a notebook already in his hand. They both had that professional, neutral expression that cops get when they're walking into a domestic situation. My grandmother looked past me into the kitchen where my parents still stood frozen by the table. Her face was hard, angrier than I'd ever seen her. "I couldn't wait," she said to me quietly. "I couldn't risk them hurting you or destroying evidence." The female officer stepped forward, showing her badge. "I'm Officer Rodriguez," she said. "This is Officer Chen. We received a report of bank fraud and identity theft. We need to ask everyone some questions." My dad finally snapped out of his frozen state. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said, turning on the charm, the friendly smile. "Nothing that requires police involvement. We can sort this out ourselves." My grandmother pushed past me into the kitchen. "This is not a misunderstanding," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "I have documentation right here." She pulled papers from her purse, unfolding them with hands that trembled slightly. The receipt for the cashier's check. $18,000 made payable to Cassidy Harper. The certified mail receipt showing it was delivered to this address and signed for by Linda Harper. My mother's name was right there, signed in her handwriting. Officer Chen stepped forward, looking at the documents, then at me. "Did you receive this money?" he asked. I shook my head. "I received $200 and a graduation card," I said. "That's all I knew about, until I called my grandmother this afternoon." Officer Rodriguez's expression hardened. She looked at my parents. "Did you deposit a check made out to your daughter into your own account?" My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. My dad grabbed her arm. "Don't say anything," he muttered. "That's probably wise," Officer Chen said, making a note in his book. "Because what you're describing is felony theft, bank fraud, forgery, and identity theft." I felt sick hearing the crimes listed out like that. These were serious. These weren't just mistakes or poor judgment. These were crimes that could send people to prison. I pulled out my phone, showing the officers the photos I'd taken. Bank statements showing the deposit. The check with my name on it. The forged signature. The notes about planning to move to Florida. Officer Rodriguez looked through each photo carefully, her expression getting more serious with each one. "Did you give your parents permission to deposit this check?" she asked me. "No," I said. "I didn't even know the check existed until today." She looked at my parents. "You understand this is a very serious situation," she said. "We're going to need to take statements from everyone and investigate this fully." My dad's face had gone from red to pale. He turned to me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Desperation. "How can you do this to us?" he asked. "We're your parents. We raised you. We fed you and clothed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years. And now you're going to have us arrested?" The audacity of that statement, the sheer nerve of it, took my breath away for a second. "You stole my future," I said. "You forged my signature. You lied to my face. You were planning to abandon me and move to Florida. How can I do this to you? How could you do this to me?" My mother tried a different approach. "Cassidy, please, think about what this means," she said, the tears flowing again. "Well, go to prison. Our lives will be ruined. Don't you care about us at all?" I looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to me and raised me and who I'd loved my entire life. "Did you think about me when you stole my money?" I asked. "Did you care about my future when you forged my signature? Did you think about me at all when you planned to disappear to Florida?" She didn't have an answer for that. Neither of them did. My grandmother stepped forward. "I'm pressing charges too," she said. "That money came from my late husband's life insurance policy. We'd been saving it in bonds for 22 years, specifically for Cassidy's future. You didn't just steal from your daughter. You violated the trust of 2 generations." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "We're going to need you both to come down to the station," she said to my parents. "You'll be processed and held pending a bail hearing tomorrow morning. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." She continued reading them their Miranda rights as my father's face turned from pale to gray. He looked at me one more time. "You're making a mistake," he said. "We're your parents. She won't testify against us." He was looking at Officer Chen now, trying to sound confident. "She's our daughter. Family doesn't do that to family." I met his eyes across the kitchen. You stopped being family when you stole from me, I said. When you lied to me. When you planned to abandon me. Family doesn't do that to family either. My mother let out this awful wailing sound. Cassidy, please, she begged. Please think about what this means. We'll go to prison. Our lives will be over. Think about us. I've thought about nothing but you my whole life, I said quietly. I trusted you more than anyone in the world, and you destroyed that. Officer Rodriguez gently took my mother's arm. We need to go now, she said. My father tried to pull away from Officer Chen, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to run or fight. But then he seemed to deflate, all the fight going out of him. They were led out of the kitchen in handcuffs, my mother still crying, my father silent and stone-faced. I watched them being walked out the front door, past the windows where neighbors were starting to gather, drawn by the police cars in our driveway. I felt exposed and humiliated and sad and angry all at the same time. Grandma put her arm around me. You did the right thing, she whispered. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you did. Officer Rodriguez came back inside after my parents were secured in the patrol car. You'll need to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement, she said. Bring all the evidence you have. The photos, the documents, everything. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Do you feel safe staying here tonight? She asked, looking around the house. Honestly, I didn't. This house felt wrong now, tainted by what I knew. Every room held memories that felt fake now. My grandmother answered for me. She's coming home with me, she said firmly. Well, pack some of her things and leave tonight. Officer Rodriguez nodded approvingly and handed me a card with a case number on it. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., she said. Ask for Detective Morrison. He'll be handling the case from here. After they left, I stood in the quiet house with my grandmother. The kitchen table still had my evidence folder on it. The evening light was coming through the windows at that golden angle that usually made everything feel peaceful. But there was no peace here. Not anymore. Come on, Grandma said gently. Let's get your things. We packed quickly, just essentials in a duffel bag. As we were leaving, I took one last look at the house I'd grown up in. Nothing looked the same anymore. Every memory had been reframed through this new lens of betrayal. I closed the door behind me, and Grandma locked it with the spare key my parents had given her years ago. Then we drove away, 3 hours north to her small house by the coast, leaving behind the ruins of what used to be my family. I didn't sleep at all that first night at Grandma's house. I lay in the guest bedroom, the same room I'd stayed in during childhood visits when the world was simple and safe, and stared at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces. My mother crying. My father's cold anger. The handcuffs. The police car pulling away with them inside. At 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Grandma was in the kitchen, sitting at her small table with a cup of tea. Shed made a second cup for me, like Shed known I'd be coming down. We sat together in the quiet, not saying much, just being there for each other. Eventually, Grandma started talking. She told me things I'd never known about my mother. How Linda had always had problems with money, even as a young woman. How she'd been caught shoplifting when she was 16, stealing expensive makeup from department stores. How she'd stolen money from relatives at family gatherings. Always small amounts. Always with excuses when confronted. I thought she'd outgrown it, Grandma said, stirring her tea. When she married your father and had you, I thought she'd changed. I never imagined she'd do something like this. Especially not to you. But looking back now, there were signs. There were always signs. When the sun came up, my phone started ringing. It hadn't stopped all night actually, but I'd had it on silent. Now, looking at the screen, I saw dozens of missed calls and texts from relatives. Extended family had clearly heard what happened. Small towns talk, and apparently the news of my parents' arrest had spread fast. The first call I answered was from Aunt Patricia, my dad's sister. She launched into it immediately. How could you have them arrested? She demanded. They're your parents. They made a mistake. Family forgives. Family doesn't call the police. I tried to explain, keeping my voice calm. They didn't make a mistake, Aunt Patricia. They stole $18,000 from me. They forged my signature. They were planning to move to Florida and leave me behind. There was a long silence. Then, Aunt Patricia's voice changed. They were going to leave you? I told her about finding the one-way tickets, the rental agreement, the notes about their plan. Another long silence. I take it back, she finally said, and I heard tears in her voice. I'm so sorry, Cassidy. I didn't know the whole story. I just heard they'd been arrested and I assumed it was blown out of proportion. But abandoning you? Stealing your future? That's unforgivable. Before we hung up, she promised she'd support me however I needed. It was the first moment of relief I'd felt since this nightmare started. Uncle Mike called next. My mother's brother. But instead of being angry at me, he was furious at my parents. I knew it, he said. I knew Linda would do something like this again. She pulled this before, Cassidy. She stole from your grandmother years ago, before you were born. We made her pay it back and she swore she'd learned her lesson. Clearly, she didn't. He told me he'd testify for me if the case went to trial, that he'd tell the court about my mother's history of theft. I'll make sure everyone knows this wasn't a one-time thing, he said. This is who she is. Part of me felt guilty for these family members turning against my parents. But a bigger part of me felt validated. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't normal. What they'd done was genuinely terrible. My cousin Rachel called in tears. Your parents borrowed $5,000 from us last year, she said. They said it was for an emergency car repair. They promised they'd pay us back after your graduation. Now I know why. They were planning to use your money to pay off their debts to other people. It kept going like that all morning. Relative after relative calling. Some angry at me, some supportive, each one revealing new pieces of the puzzle. My parents had been in deep financial trouble for years, borrowing from everyone, never paying anyone back. They'd maxed out credit cards, taken out loans they couldn't afford, lived way beyond their means, and when Grandma's check arrived, they'd seen it as their salvation. Never mind that it was mine. Never mind that it was meant for my future. They'd needed it. So they'd taken it. By noon, I'd blocked the relatives who blamed me. The ones who said things like, but they're your parents or family should forgive everything or you're ruining their lives over money. I didn't have the energy to explain to them why stealing $18,000 and planning to abandon me was unforgivable. Grandma was right when she said not everyone deserves access to you. Some people will always take the side of the perpetrator because it's easier than confronting the truth. That afternoon, we drove to the police station for my meeting with Detective Morrison. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that put me somewhat at ease. He reviewed all my evidence carefully, asking questions, taking notes, photographing the documents I'd brought. This is one of the strongest cases I've seen in years, he told me. The paper trail is clear, the premeditation is documented, the intent to flee is proven. Unless your parents take a plea deal, this is going to trial, and they're going to lose. He looked at me seriously. Are you sure you want to proceed with this? He asked. This is your parents. Once we move forward, there's no going back. I thought about his question. Really thought about it. These were my parents. The people who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, came to my school plays. But they were also the people who'd stolen my future and planned to disappear. The people who'd looked me in the eye and lied. The people who'd put their wants above my needs so thoroughly that they'd committed multiple felonies without hesitation. They stole my future, I said to Detective Morrison. Then they planned to abandon me like I was nothing. What kind of parents do that? He nodded slowly. You'd be surprised how often I see it, he said quietly. Parents are just people. And people are capable of terrible things. He explained what would happen next. My parents were trying to make bail, and my father's brother was planning to post bond. They'd probably be released that evening. A restraining order was already being filed to keep them away from me. The district attorney was reviewing the case and would decide whether to offer a plea deal or take it to trial. With this much evidence, they'd likely face 5 to 10 years each if convicted. I felt the weight of that. My testimony, my evidence, could send my parents to prison for a decade. For a moment, doubt crept in. Then I remembered the Florida rental agreement, the one-way tickets. the note that said she'll be fine on her own by then. They'd been ready to abandon me without a second thought. My resolve hardened again. That night, back at Grandma's house, I turned on the local news. The arrest had made the evening broadcast. Local couple arrested for allegedly stealing graduation gift from daughter, the anchor said. The report showed footage of my parents' house, my dad's new truck in the driveway. It showed their booking photos, both of them looking tired and defeated. The reporter explained the charges, the amount of money, the alleged plan to flee to Florida. They didn't name me since I was the victim, but they named my parents, Linda and Frank Harper, faces plastered across the screen for everyone to see. Their humiliation was complete, their crime was public, and somehow, seeing that, I felt a tiny bit of the power balance shift back in my direction. They'd tried to take everything from me, but the truth was out now, and the truth had consequences. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom for the preliminary hearing. It was my first time seeing my parents since the night they were arrested, and I'd been dreading it. They were let in wearing Orange County Jail jumpsuits, looking smaller somehow, diminished. My mother's hair was messy, her face bare of makeup, and she looked like she'd been crying for days. My father's expression was blank, carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. My mother tried to catch my eye, tried to make that connection we'd always had, but I looked away. I couldn't. I just couldn't. The prosecutor was a woman named Amanda Reeves, sharp and professional in a dark suit, with the kind of presence that commanded attention. She presented the evidence methodically, building the case piece by piece. Bank records showing my parents were nearly broke before the check arrived. The cashier's check made out to me, the deposit showing it went into their account instead. The forged signature on the back, analyzed by a handwriting expert who testified it was definitely not my signature. The notes found in their files about hiding the theft and planning to move. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in a coffin. The defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who looked overwhelmed and underprepared, tried to argue that my parents had been in desperate financial circumstances, that they'd acted out of panic, not malice, that they'd planned to pay everything back. Prosecutor Reeves shut that down immediately. They purchased a $60,000 truck, she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. They spent thousands on luxury items, designer bags, jewelry, a cruise. This wasn't about survival, this was about greed. They had $18,000 that didn't belong to them, and they spent it on luxuries while planning to abandon their daughter. During the lunch break, the defense attorney approached me in the hallway. "Your parents want to apologize," he said quietly. "They're willing to pay back everything they took. They're selling the truck, the jewelry, all of it. They want to make this right." I laughed, and it came out bitter and harsh. "Now they want to apologize?" I asked. "After they got caught? After they're facing prison?" Where was the apology when they were depositing my money into their account? The attorney looked uncomfortable. "They might be able to get $12,000 back from selling everything," he said. "I know that's not the full amount, but it's something. They're willing to work out a payment plan for the rest." I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Tell them I'll think about it," I said, even though I knew I wouldn't, even though I knew that no amount of money could fix what they'd broken. Trust can't be bought back. A relationship can't be repaired with a payment plan. They'd stolen more than money from me. They'd stolen my sense of safety, my ability to trust, my belief that parents protect their children. You can't pay that back in installments. When we returned to the courtroom, the prosecutor called an investigator to the stand. That's when things got even worse. The investigator had been digging into my parents' financial history, and had found more than just the theft from me. My father had been embezzling from his employer. That promotion Head mentioned? It was a lie. Had actually been fired 2 weeks before my graduation for stealing $7,000 from the company over the course of several months. The new truck, the expensive dinners, some of that had been funded by embezzled money too. My father sat there, his face gray, as this information was presented to the court. But the investigator wasn't done. Head also found credit cards. 3 of them. All in my name. All opened when I was 16 years old, right when I'd gotten my first part-time job and had a social security number on file for taxes. My mother had used my information to open credit cards I'd known nothing about, and over the years, she'd maxed them out, $15,000 in debt, in my name, ruining my credit before I'd even turned 20. The prosecutor handed me copies of the credit reports right there in the courtroom. I stared at them, unable to process what I was seeing. My credit score was 490, it should have been over 700 for someone my age with no debt. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The theft of the graduation money was bad enough, but this? This was years of systematic exploitation. Since I was a child, they'd been stealing my identity, destroying my future, for years. And I'd had no idea. The judge's face showed disgust as she reviewed the evidence. She looked at my parents over her reading glasses. "You systematically exploited your daughter," she said, her voice hard. "From her teenage years into adulthood, you stole her identity, you destroyed her credit, you took money meant for her future. And the evidence shows not a shred of genuine remorse. Only regret that you were caught." She denied the request for reduced bail, set a trial date for 2 months away. As my parents were led out of the courtroom, my father finally broke. "Cassidy, please," he called out, but I didn't turn around. I just walked out with my grandmother's hand in mine. Outside the courthouse, there were reporters. Cameras and microphones, people shouting questions. I kept my head down and said nothing. Grandma guided me to her car, and we drove away. That night, I sat at her kitchen table with a laptop, researching credit repair. It was going to take years to fix the damage. Years of disputing fraudulent accounts, filing police reports for identity theft, working with credit bureaus. With my credit this bad, I couldn't get an apartment on my own. Couldn't get a car loan. Some jobs might not hire me if they checked credit. My entire adult life had been sabotaged before it even began. By the people who were supposed to protect me most. Grandma found me crying at the laptop around midnight. "They've been stealing from me since I was 16, I said through tears. "How did I not know? How did I not see it?" She pulled me into a hug. "Because you trusted them," she said simply. "Because you were a child, and children are supposed to be able to trust their parents. That's not your fault. That's theirs. But it felt like my fault. It felt like I should have noticed, should have checked my credit, should have questioned things more. Even though I knew, logically, that a 16-year-old doesn't think to check for identity theft from her own parents." The next morning, I had to call my new employer, the marketing job I was supposed to start in a week. I explained the situation as professionally as I could, showing them the news articles about the identity theft, the court documents proving I was the victim. The HR director listened carefully, then said something that made me cry again. "Well, make an exception," she said kindly. "You're clearly the victim here. Your job is secure. We're not going to punish you for what your parents did. It was one small victory in an ocean of devastation. But I held on to it. I had to hold on to something." 6 weeks after that awful preliminary hearing, my parents' lawyer called. They wanted to take a plea deal. They didn't want to go to trial, didn't want to face a jury, didn't want the public spectacle of having all their crimes laid out in detail. The DA's office had offered them a deal, and they were going to take it. My mother would plead guilty to felony theft, bank fraud, and identity theft. She'd get 3 years in state prison. My father would plead guilty to the same charges plus the embezzlement from his employer. He'd get 5 years. Both of them would be required to pay full restitution. $18,000 to me for the stolen graduation money. $15,000 for the credit card fraud. $7,000 to my father's former employer. $40,000 total. To be paid through prison wages and a payment plan that would probably take 20 years, I accepted the plea deal. Not because I thought it was enough, because honestly, no punishment would ever feel like enough, but because I couldn't face a trial, couldn't sit on a witness stand and testify against my parents in front of a courtroom full of people, couldn't relive all of this in that public way. The plea deal meant it would be over faster. They'd go to prison. I'd get the restitution eventually. And I could start trying to rebuild my life. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I'd be allowed to give a victim impact statement if I wanted. I spent those 2 weeks writing and rewriting what I wanted to say. The day of sentencing arrived, and I sat in that courtroom again, my grandmother beside me, holding my hand. When it was time for my victim impact statement, I walked to the microphone on shaking legs. My parents sat at the defense table, both of them looking at me. My mother was crying before I even started talking. I looked down at my notes, took a deep breath, and began. My parents didn't just steal money, I said. And my voice was steadier than I expected. They stole my trust, my sense of safety, my ability to believe that the people who are supposed to love you most will actually protect you. I have to rebuild my life from scratch now, not because I made bad choices or because I was irresponsible, but because the people who were supposed to teach me right from wrong chose to exploit me instead. I looked up at them then, meeting their eyes. They stole my credit. They stole my future. They planned to abandon me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. And when I discovered what they'd done, they didn't apologize. They got angry. They tried to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. Even now, I don't think they understand what they've actually done. They're sorry they got caught. They're sorry they're facing consequences. But are they sorry for hurting me? I don't know if they're even capable of that kind of regret. My voice broke a little on that last part, but I pushed through. I finished by saying that I hoped they'd use their time in prison to figure out how they became people who could do this to their own daughter. Then I sat back down. The judge commended me for my courage in coming forward and prosecuting the case. She said many victims protect their abusers, especially when those abusers are family members. You chose truth and justice over comfort and denial, she said. That takes tremendous strength. Then she handed down the sentences. 3 years for my mother, 5 for my father, both to be served in state correctional facilities. Both with restitution orders. Both with no contact orders prohibiting them from reaching out to me. My mother sobbed. My father stared at the floor. And then they were taken away. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt empty. Not victorious or satisfied or even particularly sad. Just tired. The battle was over, but I didn't feel like I'd won. I'd lost my parents. Even if they were terrible parents who'd betrayed me, they were still the only parents I'd ever have. That loss was real, even if it was necessary. Grandma and I drove back to her house in silence. That night, she asked me if I regretted turning them in. I thought about it for a long time before answering. No, I finally said. I regret that I had to. I regret that they put me in a position where I had to choose between protecting myself and protecting them. But the actual decision to report them? That was self-preservation. That wasn't wrong. 3 months after the sentencing, I moved into a small apartment. Grandma co-signed the lease, since my credit was still terrible. I started my job at the marketing firm. And it turned out, I was actually pretty good at it. I worked with a credit repair company, slowly disputing the fraudulent accounts, filing the necessary paperwork, rebuilding from nothing. My credit score inched up slowly. 500. 530. Every 10-point increase felt like a victory. Grandma set up a bank account she called my Fresh Start Fund. She put $500 in it every month, determined to restore the full $18,000 Shed originally wanted me to have. I protested, said it was too much, but she wouldn't hear it. Your grandfather would want this, she said firmly. And I'm 78 and healthy and it's my money to do with as I please. Some family members stayed in touch. Uncle Mike's family visited regularly, and we'd have dinner together once a month. Cousin Rachel sent care packages to my new apartment, little things to make it feel like home. Aunt Patricia called every week to check on me, but other relatives cut me off completely. They couldn't forgive me for putting my parents in prison, couldn't understand why I'd chosen justice over family loyalty. And honestly, I was okay with that. I'd learned that just because someone is family, doesn't mean they deserve access to your life. Some people will always defend the perpetrator, because examining the crime too closely would force them to question their own choices and beliefs. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Washington, who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. She helped me understand that none of this was my fault, that I couldn't have prevented it or seen it coming, that children are supposed to be able to trust their parents, and when that trust is violated, it's the parents who failed, not the child. Slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. I made new friends at work who knew nothing about the scandal, who just knew me as Cassidy, the marketing assistant with the contagious laugh and good ideas. I could be myself with them, not the girl whose parents stole from her. 1 year after the arrest, I did something I'd been putting off. I visited my mother in prison. Just her, not my father. I needed to see her. Needed to hear what she had to say after a year of consequences. We sat across from each other in the visiting room, plastic chairs and a table between us, and she looked older, grayer, tired in a way that went bone deep. She apologized. Really apologized. Not the fake crying from the night they were arrested, but genuine remorse. She said she understood now that what they'd done was unforgivable. That Shed spent the past year in therapy, working through her issues with money and entitlement, and whatever broken part of her thought stealing from her daughter was acceptable. I listened to her apology. I even believed it was sincere. But I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I told her that. I said I appreciated that she was working on herself. But that didn't change what Shed done, or the years it would take me to recover from it. She cried, said she understood, said Shed spend the rest of her life trying to make it up to me even if I never forgave her. I left that prison feeling complicated. Sad and angry and a little bit hopeful all at once. I haven't been back since. I don't know if I will, but at least I gave her one chance to explain herself, and she took it seriously. That's more than my father would have done. Now, sitting on Grandma's porch on a sunny Saturday afternoon, both of us holding coffee mugs and watching the ocean in the distance, I think about how far I've come. Grandma asks me the question she's asked a dozen times before. Do you regret turning them in? I think carefully before answering, like I always do. No, I say. I regret that I had to. I regret they put me in that position. But reporting them? That was self-preservation. That was survival. Grandma nods, satisfied with my answer like she is every time. You chose yourself, she says. That's not selfish, that's survival. I'm 23 now. I've been promoted at work, gotten a raise, moved to a slightly bigger apartment that I can almost afford on my own. My credit score is up to 600, still not great but getting better month by month. I'm dating someone, a guy named Trevor, who's an accountant, and who I met through mutual friends. He's kind and patient, and understands that I have trust issues, that I need to take things slow. Has never pressured me. Never made me feel bad for being cautious. That kind of respect feels revolutionary after everything I've been through. Grandma is healthy and we have dinner together every week, and she's become my closest relationship. The person I call when something good happens, or when I'm having a bad day. She's teaching me her recipes, the ones my grandfather loved, and we cook together in her kitchen while she tells me stories about him. I'm building a life that's mine, piece by piece, and nobody can steal it from me. The $18,000 my parents took, they're paying it back slowly, $20 a month from prison wages. At that rate, it'll take decades. But Grandma's already replaced most of it with her Fresh Start fund. The money matters less now than it did a year ago. What matters more is that I stood up for myself, that I chose truth over comfort, that I refused to let them make me complicit in my own victimization. I've started writing about my experience online, anonymously at first but eventually under my real name. I share my story with others who've been betrayed by family, who've had to make the impossible choice between protecting themselves and protecting their abusers. The messages I get are heartbreaking and hopeful all at once. So many people stuck in similar situations, afraid to report their own family members, afraid of being seen as the villain. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. If your family steals from you, it's not your fault. If you report them, you're not the villain, you're the survivor, and survival is the bravest choice you can make. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by who shows up for you, who protects you instead of exploiting you, who celebrates your success instead of stealing it. I lost my parents, but I gained clarity. I lost my innocence, but I gained strength. I lost $18,000, but I gained self-respect and the knowledge that I can survive anything, that I can rebuild from nothing and come out stronger. I have bad credit, trust issues, and a complicated relationship with the concept of family. But I also have the truth. I have dignity. I have boundaries. I have a future that I'm building myself, brick by brick, with no foundation of lies underneath it. And nobody, not even my parents, can steal that from me. Not anymore. Sometimes people ask me what the lesson is in all of this. What I learned from being betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me most. And here is what I tell them. Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones we need protection from. Blood doesn't obligate you to accept abuse, theft, or betrayal. Choosing truth over comfort, justice over enabling, and yourself over toxic loyalty isn't selfish. It's survival. Real family doesn't steal your future. Real family helps you build it. And if you have to walk away from those who harmed you, even if they're your parents, remember this: you're not breaking the family. They broke it when they betrayed your trust. Your only job is to save yourself and build something better. Something real. Something that can't be stolen because it's built on truth instead of lies. So here I am, 23 years old, sitting on my grandmother's porch, drinking coffee and watching the waves. I have a job I'm good at, an apartment I'm proud of, relationships built on honesty and respect. I have a future that's entirely my own, and yeah, my parents are in prison. Yeah, I'm the one who put them there. And I'd make that same choice again, every single time. Because I chose myself. I chose truth. I chose survival. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting someone you love? Have you ever had to report a family member for something they did to you? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. And your stories matter. They help other people know they're not alone. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel because I share more stories about family trauma, recovery, and building a life after betrayal. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with the decision to protect themselves even when it means standing up to family. Your support means everything. And together we can break the silence around family abuse and exploitation. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, choosing yourself is never wrong. You deserve protection, even if you have to be the one to provide it. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next video.